Hello, everyone. Welcome to Doctors Making a Difference. I'm your host, Dr. Peter Crane. I'm a physician in rural Idaho where I've been in practice since 2011. Over the past couple of years, I've had the opportunity to be both a physician and a patient, and I've been so thankful for the doctors and other healthcare professionals who have helped me. I invite you to join us as we highlight physicians around the world who are making a difference in their communities and with their patients. Our goal is to give physicians and other healthcare professionals the tools they need to be successful in medicine, in finances, and in life. What we do makes a tremendous difference for our patients and our communities. Please go to your podcast service or YouTube channel and give us a 5-star review and hit the like or subscribe button. It helps get the message out to others. You can also check out more content on our website, doctorsmakingadifference.com. Finally, if you would like to be on the show or have any questions or topics that you feel should be addressed on the show, please contact me. The easiest way to get in contact is to subscribe to the newsletter and then hit reply to any of the newsletter emails. Welcome to the Doctors Making a Difference podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast today. We've got my friend Julie Gunther. Appreciate you being here, Julie. Why don't you go and introduce yourself to the audience today?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. So I'm Dr. Julie Gunther. I'm a board certified family physician who grew up in Boise, Idaho. And for about 10, I worked for a traditional healthcare system. And then for 10 years, I owned, operated, and ran my own micro practice. So a small direct primary care practice that was from 2014 to 2024, kind of right on the sort of the peak of the beginning of a surge in this direct primary care movement in the United States. And as a result was not only a practicing physician for cash only, so no longer taking any insurance and step outside of that healthcare box, but also became a national speaker about healthcare transformation, healthcare spending, how to advocate for yourself as a patient, how to restore the physician-patient relationship, and some leadership roles, both within local and national legislatures, trying to change how we talk about paying for healthcare, and national roles leading physicians who do cash-based healthcare.
That's awesome, Julie. Julie and I went to residency together, so we've known each other from way back. But
Yeah.
I remember attending a lecture that you gave, kind of talking about your transition from kind of traditional, insurance-based practice to primary care, or to direct primary care. And I was interested in kind of not just the genesis of that, but reflect back like you did maybe a little bit in that talk of the young
Yeah.
Julie Gunther that was this aspiring, idealistic physician in training to having graduated, and then you're like, oh, maybe this isn't quite what I expected, and then
Yeah.
you had the guts to early on jump right into it, and something like you said, you kind of in the early stages of primary care, direct primary care.
Yeah. Do you remember where that was? I don't know where that was, but
I think it was at Idaho, or was it a family medicine conference somewhere? I can't remember which one it
yeah, yeah,
was,
yeah.
but
I think so. Yeah. Well, so no, I appreciate you bringing that up. So I'm almost 50, and I've had some pretty major health events, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And I think both time, exhaustion, and big sideways pivots, unexpected pivots, have led me to really do a ton of work on who I am. And to get to the point of your question, I think it's important that I share when I apply. I never felt like I fit in medicine. And I think some of it is we hear more and more about a lot of women struggling from imposter syndrome. But if I go all the way back to even looking at deciding to become a doctor, so I went to Harvard for undergrad. I got a C in calculus. I had a really radical, crazy Russian calculus teacher my freshman year. I couldn't understand anything. I went from Idaho to Harvard and was just genuinely totally lost. Had always got A's, high A's. Couldn't keep up with the work. Was just thought like a sinkhole was going to open. I was going to fall in it. And just really got very lost. Struggled with some depression. In hindsight, Boston's so dark and dreary.
mhm.
Struggle with perfectionism, and from that, and then I was around people whose goals were like research, MD, PhD at Johns Hopkins. Right, these were young people, far more prepared than I was for what they wanted to do next. I had always just kind of followed whatever I wanted to do with excitement. So the reason that's important is I spent a lot of my early career, even after getting into med school, even after being very successful in medical school, even after being very joyfully and clearly desired by our residency directors as a highly competitive residency candidate, to the point that they were like, once you graduate, because I was pregnant my last year of med school, once you graduate, call us, we will FedEx a contract. Like a lot of very exceptional feedback that people saw the good work that I did. In my own head, I really, really, really struggled with, am I good enough to do this? That's the downside. The upside is, until recently, until the last couple of years, I never wavered in my profound passion for people and my profound belief that we individuals are agents of change, and that when we show up for something, what we do or say matters. And it's our responsibility to be honest, kind, truthful, vulnerable, and to do hard things and to try to do heavy lifting, to the point that I was really raised like with this sort of concept that if I come home at the end of the day and show my cup of energy and there's a drop, it's get back out there and until that's empty, right? And Dr. Delicia Haynes, who's a direct care doctor, taught me something about boundaries, which is we serve from our overflow, we don't serve from our cup. And that was something that's really been radical for me to work on in the last 5 to 7 years or so. But when you heard me speak, I mean, it sounds strange. I mean, I was on fire and burned for this idea that we individual physicians have the greatest skill set and the most ability to one by one become the drops that fill the new cup of what healthcare looks like. And I still very earnestly believe that. So I went from really profound questioning of my ability to be a good doctor, what that was piggybacked on what I would honor as potentially one of the clearest, most earnest callings to doctor to people. And then fast forward to some transitions I had later in my own life, realizing that with some life changes and energy changes related to illness and other things, I actually did have to refocus and figure out, how can I earnestly and authentically be the doctor I have such a clear view I would want for myself, and I know is the right way to doctor for me, that I sleep so restfully with such profound integrity that on this given day I treated and cared for people in this given way. How do I do that and still not have that empty cup at the end of the day? And for me, I could not resolve that,
No,
which
it's
is
interesting.
why I departed. But I love people. I love how dumb they are. I love how predictably unpredictable they are. I love how brilliant they are. I love the gifts our patients give us through this weird transmittal of stories and energy. I love this hunt we have to play for disease to try to flush it out and eradicate it before it impacts the human. Um, yeah.
No, I think, Julie, I'm just thinking back to what you just said. It's interesting because all of us have a sort of an origin story. And I think we all start off pretty hopeful. And I think one of the interesting things that I wanted to kind of get your comment on is most people that go to an Ivy League school have spent a lot of money and have invested a lot, and they come to the end of that and say, boy, I don't think I could become a primary care doctor because I have X number of dollars of debt, and the math doesn't really work to pay that back. And then the second piece of it is, I remember even I went to the University of Utah Medical School, and I remember being actively discouraged from pursuing primary care. And I'm curious, in your experience in medical school and coming out of that, how did you choose primary care? And you kind of found
Yeah.
your center, at least that point in your life, in kind of in that preventative primary care mode.
Yeah. So Peter, is this podcast, do people see our pictures too, or just
Yeah,
audio?
no,
Okay.
it's
So,
podcast.
so I'm sitting at home today, and people can kind of see one of my 5 photo walls, right? So I'm a polymath. It took me a long time to learn that. And for people who aren't familiar with that, polymaths are, and that can seem as being sort of self complementary. You've known me long enough, you'll probably affirm this comment. Polymaths are people who have an innate ability to be very, very good at a diverse amount of things. I've also recently, it's been suggested I have ADHD. I have some strong feelings about that on my own personal behalf, but I've sewn one amazing, beautiful quilt in my life. And when I completed it, like I worked for 4 years to learn how to
Mm.
sew this amazing, beautiful king size luxury quilt. I've never sewed another quilt again, right? I know how to do pottery at a very high level. I threw and ran the pottery lab all through college. Haven't done it since. I know how to personally develop old timey photographs. Haven't done it since. I have a deep passion for rearranging and reconfiguring things to make them better, like design improvement. I am passionate about art and creation. So, all of that's to say, I thrive all over the place. And I think that's why I excel at primary care. I do not I do not care. I do not worry. It doesn't scare me to play the what's behind door number one all day long, right? Which is what I joke we do in primary care. What's behind door? You have to knock, go in. It doesn't even matter what your nurse said they're there for. It's never what they're really there for.
It's never what they're. It's
yeah,
never the same thing.
So it's just this fake exercise, right? So I'm just like, it's all garbage. Go in, meet this person, and then you have to just suspend all control. And it's your job, in my opinion, it's our job to become this magic conduit to actually get to the truth. When the person on the other side is likely trying their best, but doesn't know the language we talk, they're presenting what they think is happening, but that's not necessarily what's happening, but they're the one having it. So it's this beautiful work that we have to do, and it's wildly imperfect. And you have to bake in uncertainty, because you have to know if your own neuroses wants perfection and certainty, you may harm the patient. If your own neuroses doesn't have the ability to push past uncertainty when it's appropriate, you might harm the patient. And then you're not really headed towards that path of truth. So I took calculus freshman year at Harvard, as all good perfectionistic people do. And I took organic chemistry, and I got like 42% on the organic chemistry test, and was like,
Ooh.
and I went in, and the professor's like, you did really well. And people were stealing each other's notes. I mean, it was sort of the classic garbage you hear about the high level institutions, lack of collaboration, just super cutthroat, people stealing each other's notes, all these. But also, I was not super plugged in. I was a big former basketball playing white girl from Idaho, and just by chance got assigned to, in your freshman year at Harvard, you live in the dorms. Well, your whole year you live on campus. I was assigned to what was the smallest freshman dorm. And there was, I think, probably 30 of us in this dorm, and 3 of us were non first generation Asian American going to pre-med. Like it was just super skewed just by fluke luck. And I made the decision in college, like, I'm not going to overstretch myself. I'm not going to do all the things. I'm going to focus and be an amazing student, which was absolutely the wrong recipe for me as a human. And so all that's to say, I got a C in calculus. I met with the pre-med advisor, who was a graduate student who was reapplying, I think, to go to like Johns Hopkins or something. And he literally looked at me and said, you will never be a competitive med school candidate. Really? with the grades you have. And I said, I don't want to do this work right now. Like, it just doesn't feel right. It wasn't the right time in my life. I felt so depressed and out of sorts and confused, and like I was failing. And like I kind of shared a little bit, I felt just really, really, really like I sucked, basically. And the reality was, Harvard and medicine as a whole do not celebrate polymaths. They do not celebrate, especially primary care. Primary care benefits radically from creative thinkers, from out of the box thinkers, from people who are a little bit nutty, from people who are like, hey, we can MacGyver that. Rural primary care celebrates, like, can you use a Dremel to cut a cast off? You can. You know what I mean? The amount of awesome things I've done once I became fully empowered and was like, I don't have to have the FDA approved device to do this. This is just a 4,000 version of a $40 tool that can do the same work, because I'm the one with the expertise. So direct primary care, where I eventually transitioned to, brought me so much joy, partially because I had a much clearer idea of where I could hack healthcare and solve problems simply, affordably, quickly, with just so much less burden. Like, do I need to buy trash cans from a medical supplier? No, I can buy them at Costco.
I know, you
right?
remember the $400 trash cans from
Yeah,
the medical
yeah.
supply. Like, why are we spending so much money on the trash cans?
Does this like compost human body parts? Like, what is this trash can doing?
No.
So I would argue in the degree program I pursued, being a polymath at Harvard and being a very obedient, respectful polymath at Harvard at the time, I did not thrive. However, having a degree from Harvard as a polymath is very powerful because everything I did, I was a riflery instructor at a summer camp in Maine. I was a men's design intern in New York City for J. Crew. Then I worked in software marketing. So I made the decision my sophomore year to drop out of all of my pre-meds and pivoted and attempted to switch to a studio art degree and was told no. And it was an East Coast no, meaning like, I'm from Idaho, you tell me no. And I was like, okay, and in hindsight, I'm very angry about it because that was a moment of inflection that would have been the right choice for me. But my mom's a microbiologist, my dad's an engineer. There's two jobs in the whole world they believe are worth people doing, and it's engineering or medicine. So it took me a very long time in my life to realize, and our upbringing and our influences and the people who love us, they are a sum total part of who we are. So did I declaratively become a physician because it's the calling that was maximally suited to me and my skill set? Absolutely not. Did I look at that Harvard pre-med advisor sophomore year who said, you're never going to get into med school? And I said, I am, and I will if I want to, because I knew I wanted to just be like this country bumpkin, rural. Even then I was like, if I'm a doctor, I wanted to own a house and have the clinic be in the downstairs and live upstairs. Like I knew that. And my husband, when I eventually met him, was like, could it be across the street? You know what I mean? And I wanted, yeah, I wanted the knock, knock, knock on the door in the middle of the night. Like, hey, Dr. Gunther, our kid's sick. Like that's my vision. That's what I wanted to be as a doctor. I want to live in rural Idaho and hunt and fish and just live outside and serve a community and have it just be this sort of ongoing continuity. And that most people who maybe want to do that don't choose to go to Harvard. And I guess one more comment. And so I was like, if I want to do it, I'll go back. And he's like, no, you won't. People don't do that. And I did. I stopped pre-med in college and went and worked for a tech startup in Austin, Texas, in their marketing department. And worked my tail off and felt like I was going to burn in hell because we were falsely representing that we had. Basically, the sales team went out, figured out what big companies that had huge sales forces needed from their software, said we had that, came back. I did marketing, like wrote the marketing content, worked with the design team to market that we had this product that then the developers were actually in real time making for the next meeting. So, I mean, maybe that's just how business works. But at the time I felt like that was really dishonest and it was millions and millions of dollars. A whole bunch of us had to give the first 3 months was like a think tank. We had to do presentations. They fired half of us. The other half of us had been up like 2 or 3 days continuously. They put us on a plane, flew us to Vegas and asked us all to leverage our very first paycheck on roulette. And I said no, because I was like, I got to pay rent on my first apartment.
Right.
And if you did, then you were in like Flynn with the CEO. There were deals made at strip clubs. Like it was just this whole thing. And I had this epiphany about halfway through. I was like, I ran away or I moved away from becoming a doctor because I was afraid it would be too much work. And then that's where I kind of realized like everywhere I go, I work all the time. I'm a total workaholic. So I was like, and I could spend my whole life doing this and make money, and they would give people BMWs. And it's like, I could have made a lot of money. But I still didn't quite fit in. I was second fiddle to the programmers as the marketers. And I was like, I'm not really doing anything. Like I'm writing about a product that doesn't exist to a company that sells cars. So their sales force can be tracked. I was like, this is not life work for me. And so I applied to Vanderbilt because they had a post-baccalaureate program where you could pay them money and go take whatever you wanted. And I took all the pre-meds in 1 year. And as a 1 year out of Harvard graduate, was competing with sophomores at Vanderbilt. So was just in a totally different place. Like day one in my biology class, went up to the professor, said, hi, I'm Julie Schultz at the time. Hi, I'm Julie Schultz. I'm taking this class for this purpose. On this day, I'm going to be taking the MCAT, and I'm going to be asking you for a letter of recommendation on this day. What, like, no way I did that as an undergrad. Like, you know what I mean? So, and then I tutored. I made money on the side and tutored, and I moved in with my then fiance, and we got married that year. And I took the MCAT and applied and got in. So, and I got in. My top school was UW, University of Washington, because of being from Idaho. I also, being from Idaho, didn't really have a statistically high chance of getting in anywhere because of residency constraints. I was pretty competitive, but not insanely competitive. Like all of my pre-meds were A's eventually, right? But like,
Yeah,
and I'm
eventually.
sure Harvard helped, and I knew how to write. I tanked the first MCAT, tanked it. I prepped and prepped and prepped, and I made a mistake. I did Kaplan, and I was so scared that I wasn't going to do as well on the math and physics. Turns out I'm really good at math and physics. I just, at the time, again, imposter syndrome stuff. Um, I tanked the verbal, like almost a zero, but I got the second highest score you could possibly get on the essay at the time when you had to write an essay or the interpretive. So like, I don't know what I did wrong. I think we had reading and then verbal or something, and I got like a T or a U or whatever, like this high letter, but I got like almost no points. So I either bubbled wrong, or I think I had done so much of the Kaplan verbal, I was tweaked to their minutia. So my score put my applications on hold pretty much everywhere. University of San Francisco, UCSF, like the day I applied was like, no.
Oh, really?
I got a letter back.
You're
Yeah, I
like,
got an instant letter back.
sorry, you spent an application fee on us. No.
Yeah, bam. I was like, that came back so fast. Um, I think, so everybody put me on hold except Colorado and Ohio State. And I had interviews and got admitted both of those. And when those happened, I was like, okay, either way, I can live my dream. UW put me on hold, took the MCAT again. The results came back 3 days before we got married. My husband was checking the mailbox to hide it from me because he said if I had a crap score, he was going to say I hadn't come back. And I was in the shower a couple days before our wedding, and he sticks the piece of paper around, and I had rocked it because I didn't tank 30% of the score. So then I got an interview at UW, and I got it at UW. And UW at the time, I don't know if it still is, for at least a decade, if not 15 years, was the top primary care training school. So it all kind of lined up. And then I very aggressively, they said you had the opportunity to train in your home state most of the time. I had to do my first year in Idaho, second year in Seattle, and then third and fourth year, I actually had to design my own education to stay in Idaho as much as possible because it was allowed, but it hadn't really been fully done to the extent to which I wanted to do it. So I mapped out almost all my rotations in Idaho, third and fourth year.
Well, it's interesting, Julie, to kind of I think reflect back on the why, and you, from what I gather, I think you would fit this idea pretty well. Your feet on the ground and your head in the clouds, and I think that fits primary care pretty well because you have to have big ideas, and we're going to save the world, and we're going to prevent every disease, and we're going to live and have the clinic down the street or across the street or in your basement, and yet you have to have your feet on the ground and be able to say like I can pass the classes, I can pass the board exams, I can do all those things to make sure that you're actually giving patients a person who's properly educated. And I appreciate you sharing your uncertainties along the way because sometimes some of the listeners on this are early stage or medical students, and it can feel like imposter syndrome, like I don't think I can ever do this. And boy, Dr. Gunther's got everything figured out. I'll bet she never made a mistake in her life, yada yada.
Right.
And it's
Right.
good for us to see like, hey, there were black eyes along the way, and I didn't have it all figured out, but I knew who I was, and I knew where I could make a difference. That's what this podcast is called: is Doctors Making a Difference. Because I mean, you found out you weren't going to do well in the business world quite as much, or at least you weren't going to make the difference you had envisioned for your
Yeah.
life. And then you found it in medicine, and then eventually in primary care, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah. I appreciate that as a reflection. It's taken me, the that's kind of the arc of the beginning, the arc of I wouldn't call it the end, the arc of my most recent years. It's taken me, I think the original impetus of like I need to leave. So this is gonna make me sound crazy, but I kind of am, and that's okay. My favorite artist in the whole world is Gustav Klimt. He's not alive anymore. He's a painter around the 1900s, and a lot of people know his work, The Kiss. But he was commissioned to do a series of panels for the University of Vienna. And one of those and they're huge ceiling panels. And they don't exist anymore. They were burned by the Nazis right at like the last day the Nazis were retreating from Switzerland or Germany or wherever these panels were secretly, not so secretly hidden. But one of the panels was jurisprudence, so law, philosophy, and medicina. And the Medicina panel is amazing. And I'd encourage people to Google it, Klimt, Klimt, Medicina, and then kind of go down the Google hole because it's been really excerpted. So with Klimt's work, there's a lot of visual imagery online where people have only taken a segment of the actual painting. But in the front foreground of Medicina is Hygeia, the daughter of, and I say these words wrong, I'm sure, but Asclepius, who's the god of medicine. And interesting note, as general public education for all of us in medicine, the caduceus is not the symbol of the god of medicine. Did you know that?
I've heard
It's
that
the
before.
symbol of Mercury. Yeah.
Right.
And the US, there's something about the US military uses it. So, but long story short, actually, do not put the caduceus up in your office or on your wall. Or ask for the caduceus. It's the rod of Asclepius, and it's a single rod with a snake. Yeah, that's actually the symbol of medicine. So in the United States, we're like wrong on that one. Which when I learned that, I was like, it's so metaphorical for the whole thing, right? It's put forward. This is how it is for everyone, and then you're like, that's not even the right mythological reference. Anyway, so I was sitting in my office. I have a reprint of just the segment of Hygeia, because she's standing in front of the river of humanity. And one of the early criticisms when she's turning her back on humanity, that's not what the intention of the painting is. She's standing in front with all the symbols of medicine to guard and protect humanity throughout their life. And I just love everything about this painting. Anyway, long story short, I was sitting in my office. I promised not doing any drugs, not having any weird moments, just sitting there, just kind of reflecting. And I had this just overwhelming energy moment of like, we're good. Like, I'm looking at her, she's looking at me. She's like, we are good. And at the time, I was passionately practicing direct primary care, fighting with the healthcare system to advocate for my patients to get high quality care, begging the ER to properly admit people, and so angry about my own healthcare, both from an administrative standpoint, from how I was treated, I was straight up harassed by an administrator when my first chemo was started, while I was the acting medical director of that hospital's hospice. I'm like, I'm on your med staff. Like, I'm the head of your hospice and you're threatening me. It was bizarre, like bizarre. Anyway, so that was maybe 6 to 7 years ago, but it was just this very powerful moment of like release. And it took me a very long time to then get to a place where I figured out what I needed to do for me, and I was able to do it. And so in October of 23, I sold my direct primary care practice to a colleague and an awesome doctor who's just at a different phase in his career and still really passionately pushing the needle forward in direct patient care. And I've taken the last year-ish off in a way, not really. I still, I'm doing some aesthetic medicine and with the GLP and GIP-1s, unexpectedly started to do weight loss medicine a little bit, which is the first time in my career I've been willing to prescribe medicine for weight loss. And aesthetic medicine and weight loss medicine has been transformative for me, because it brings so much agency to me taking care of other people. And my advice for everyone that does what we do is, and it took me a long time to find this, is like, there's a way to serve people incredibly. But I had this shift, and I finally found out how to practice this mantra, which is, I am not going to work harder than you are. Which if you had told me that 10 or 15 years ago, I would feel like, well, some people don't understand, or they don't know a heart attack could kill them, and they don't know, and we have the burden of knowledge, and I'm privileged, and if I have the energy, or I'm young, I should serve, I should lift, like do all the heavy lifting, right? My analogy was, if people have their life and their history and their health and all their stuff, it's this big backpack of stuff. The way I practiced for so long was, let me carry that for you. And even metaphorically, I would be like, you want that flag on top of the hill? and your foot hurts, I will go get it because I can. And when I had my own illness and lost a lot of bandwidth, I started to have to set boundaries I didn't want to set around what I could or could. I hate the word boundaries still, by the way. But I don't know what finally clicked for me was this idea of like checking in as I serve others on like, are they willing to do the work here? And I also mean, are they willing to pay you for your services? Are they willing to treat you with respect? Are they willing to show up for their visits? Are they willing to work with you in a partnership, which is if you say, hey, I'll have your pathology results back in a week. And I started to change my practice in a lot of ways. Hey, I'm going to, take them all off. Have the pathology back in a week. If you don't hear from me, you need to call me. Like shared accountability, not this like, you never called me about my results. I really transitioned to, I'm sick and I need in today, right? I'm so sorry. I don't have an opening before. And so I need but it sounds like you are sick. Tell me a little more about it. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I would love to see you. I need to listen to your lungs. I don't have that opening today. Will you please I need you to go to urgent care versus I'll just add him on, call my husband. I'm not going to be home. I'm going to stay until the work is done and the work's coming forward like a deluge, right? So I just really transitioned. The other example, I need to see Dr. Gunther this week. I'm going on a vacation. I'm going out of town, which people don't always disclose. I need to come in, and you look and they no-showed their visit last week or whatever. No, right. But I need to come in. And I've just transitioned to, I'm willing to see you during my lunch hour tomorrow at 2:00. Well, I can't do that. That's the opening I have. Okay, I'll make it work. And like, until I got really tired, I continued to work harder than my patients on a lot of these administrative things. I took care of people years beyond them actually paying me. And the payment isn't about money, it's about value and respect. It's about saying, and what I saw in direct care sometimes is I would offer to patients who are in financial hardship. Like I had a lady who cleaned houses, right? And she's like, I'm sorry, we've had some financial hardship. I can't pay my direct care fees, which were low, but low is relative, right? And I said, well, I don't have anyone to clean the clinic right now. My nurse and I clean the clinic. And she was like, oh yeah, uh-huh.
Right.
And then I had people,
take the hint.
Tick. And then I had someone say, Dr. Gunther, we love you. I was taking care of her family. And she's a photographer. And I was fairly new. My clinic was fairly new and I didn't have any art up. And she was like, could we trade? Could I bring you 2 very large photographs for these walls in exchange for a year of care? And I was like, that'd be amazing. Never brought photographs, stock care. So I don't think people are malintended. I think people think doctors are just fine. I think they think we are living a high life. I think they think we're healthy and happy and restored and capable. And I think people think we have these romantic, perfect lives. And I think our patients can forget we're human. It's not really their job to remember that we're human, right? We're not their friends. They're people we care very deeply about and maybe even love. And I think we think more about them than they do about us beyond measure. I think we care far more about our patients than they do about us because we are an agent for an end result for them. People come in our office 10, 20, 30, 60 minutes a couple times a year. And then the second they leave, they're on the phone to their next thing. We're thinking about them, following up, double checking, filling meds. So a powerful thing for me was to recognize like, it's okay if my patients don't value or care about me the way I want to be cared about or valued, because that's the gig. But it's not about me. People aren't behaving this way to harm me. It's just that I'm not super relevant in my patient's life. And I'm sure some of my patients, if they heard this, would be like, oh my God, Dr. Gunther, that's not true. But I think we live in so much worry, stress, thought, and I don't think our patients think we need gratitude and we need them to pay their bill and we need them to show up on time and we need them to help us help them, kind of a thing. And I'm probably speaking to the choir to a certain extent. And then for the active physicians who are like, what is she talking about? One of the things I wanted to make sure I said today is I think one of the absolute leading causes of burnout, the leading cause of burnout in our profession is how we treat each other. So having sold my practice to a male provider who's really compassionate and really lovely and really funny and just a great human, but watching kind of the hatchet come to certain sort of unspoken contractual relationships I had with patients that were just not a great fit for his expectations or his business model, the way he functions his business, has let me reflect on the business I built extracted a lot from me. We all have a different patient population, and it's an interesting cultivation of, if you or I were on ZocDoc or something, I don't know if you've seen these profiles. They have like, hi, I'm Dr. Julie, and people can scroll and then pick who they think they're going to like, right? People
Right.
are going to pick you, and the people who are going to pick me are not the same people. And so from the moment you or I walk into that room, there's already been an odd self-selection that is not within our control of type of person. And then depending on how we behave, these people refer their friends, blah, 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 right? So you are not doing the same work I am doing. When you go in an office, you go in a room and take care of someone with hypertension, and I go in a room and take care of someone with hypertension. We are not doing the same thing for innumerable reasons that you, I'm sure, understand about
Right.
sort of just so to then assume that our day is the same, our burden's the same, this does to our gender differences, education differences, home expectation differences, right? Money management differences, how you and I, what we do on the weekend, how we take care of ourselves, health issues, right? Nothing extrinsic. I'm not even talking about that. I am talking about when you go to work on a Monday and I go to work on a Monday and we both go in at 8 and come home at 5, which you and I both know is not real.
That's not real at all.
Yeah, there's a series of decisions you and I can make that might make our day similar, but the way we're treated, the expectations people have of us are radically different. I would contend women and men on par have to navigate those things differently. And I'm going to say something probably really controversial, but I'm going to say it. Men have a much, much easier gig in primary care than women, like radically easier, because men generally want to see men, not always. Women generally want to see women. And for most of your listeners, if you thought about who's the chatty Cathy in your relationship, it's usually the woman if you're in a heteronormative relationship or a heterosexual relationship. But women just have different needs. Women are treated very differently by our healthcare system. Often their health complaints are neglected and they go on the hunt for a doctor that's going to listen to them. Women, we know, are the drivers of healthcare decision making. Most of the time, women are the ones who schedule children. Most of the time, women are the ones who are caring for aging parents. So when you take care of a lot of women in a healthcare system designed largely with data that mostly is aggregated around what happens when we give this medicine to men, it's a whole different bag of worms. So I just say that simply because I would love to see our profession grow in a profound amount of empathy and grace for each other. Because what I see over and over and over again is our colleagues are the first ones. I just feel like there's this overwhelming culture of don't step out of the box, don't step out of line. And that may be my own issues from way back when, but I still to this day had this overwhelming sense that all of a sudden one day I'm not going to be allowed to be a doctor anymore because they're going to come for me. And I don't know if you feel that. I don't know if other doctors feel that, but that on top of everything else wore me out beyond measure. And I don't think I have some really amazing positive collegial relationships, but when I stepped out and started doing direct care, it was very clear to me that the vast majority of my colleagues were on the watch for both, is she going to succeed? And, what are you, I had someone come and be like, so are you just like dispensing controlled substances? I was like, what are you talking about? Like, no, like you can provide amazing, great care way out of the box, and it's well within our rights to do so. You can provide care out of a van with a stethoscope. There's nothing wrong with that. Well, every state's law is different. So, but we functioned under so much duress, and it would be amazing to have. You said earlier there's 1 million physicians in the United States. It would be really restorative if we somehow got back to having an incredible amount of mutual respect, understanding, empathy, and kindness towards each other.
Yeah.
because we need it and we all need it and we're all suffering and we're all scared and we all have bad days. And I guess one more anecdote I'll share and then I'll shut up is, and this makes me super sad and this seems self-complimentary, but in the process of starting at my direct care, I had all these side hustles, and I had a nurse say, like, "Oh my God, are you a shark? Do you just swim while you sleep?" Because one day I was in between urgent care patients at an on-site medical clinic, answering hospice, like signing hospice orders, answering a call from my nurse at my clinic. I'm like, "Yeah, put him on at 4:30." And then I was doing an interview for another side job at a methadone clinic that would be like from 5 to 7 a.m. or something. I was like, "Yeah, I can do all this in May." And then I actually at the time was contracted to fly in to an LTAC in Montana for a week at a time stints, and that paid really well. Unfortunately, I only did one stint before I was diagnosed with cancer. But that year I was going to pay off my medical debt too. I was so excited. Anyway, and I forgot what I was saying. So this is what I do. I blip. Oh, I know. So I worked at this clinic. So I had wisely contracted with this clinic. So my other advice is if you have a side hustle and you know it's going to stink, but you're doing it for a purpose, negotiate an hourly wage, not an RVU wage, not a number of patients wage, an hourly wage, which means no matter how crappy that place is in terms of their management, their lab pickup is 3 hours after clinic closure and they need you to sit there. You know, they triple book you, they retro book you. That was my favorite. 6 o'clock, they're like, "Your 3 o'clock patient is here." I was like, "It's 6 p.m. They're like, "Well, your 3 o'clock patient canceled. They called, so we put them in your 3 o'clock spot. They're here now." I'm like, "That's not a thing. Like, that's not,
I've never heard
that's
that
not a
phrase,
thing." Oh my
retro
God.
booking, but I've seen it
I had
happen.
I was like, "That's not a thing. It's not free." Like that. Anyway, so I had done a really good job with my contracting with this place, which ultimately meant I sat there for 8 hours and saw like one patient at one point. And so one day I was there and I was contracted to be there 8 hours, and it had two sides. I'd had a physician and a nurse practitioner working. And I'm sitting there. I didn't have a patient for like 6 hours. All my stuff was done because I would stay until my work was done and make them pay me until I walked out of the building. And so I went over and I asked the nurses, and they had like 8 or 10 rooms queued up. And it was a nuts on their side. And I was the urgent care side. It was just a like scheduling disaster, right? So I went over and I was like, "What's in 2? What's in 3? What's in 4?" And it was like sore throat, knee pain, super easy things. And I was like, "Okay, I'll say Dr. Bob." I was like, "Okay, tell Dr. Bob which one," it was like Dr. Bob's supposed to go in 2, 3, 4. I was like, "Okay, when Bob comes out of 1, tell Dr. Bob to go to 5. I'll hit off 2, 3, 4." So I went in and bam, 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 right? It took me 30 minutes or whatever, bam, bam, bam. And Dr. Bob came out and he looked at me when we kind of all settled. He came out and he looked at me. He goes, "I've never in my life," and he's mid-career, he goes, "I've never in my life had someone help me." And I was like, "I'm here, I'm getting paid." Like, and he was like, "I've never had anyone do that for me." And I was like, "I'm sorry, is it okay?" Like, he was like, "No, like I'm caught up now. Like I get a lunch, And I was like, "Yeah." And here's the kicker. During my lunch that day, I got yelled at by the clinic administrator because I'm not allowed to do that. Because once a patient was checked in, they were tagged to him and billing was under him, and they didn't know how to reverse it from my note to me. So now they weren't going to be able to bill for their care because they didn't. And I was just like, if I could curse, I would tell you. What was super fun about that job too was after stuff like that. So I was the last vestige of hope. They couldn't open the clinic if they didn't have someone there. And it was so dysfunctional. In the 4 years I filled in there, 40 different employees came and went, including 19 providers. So it was super fun. And what was fun was I'd get a text like 2:30 on a Wednesday. "Can you be here at 6 a.m. tomorrow?" And if I could, I'd be like, "Yeah, I'll move 1 or 2 of my direct care patients." "Yeah, I can." The flip side of that was when they came up to me and said absurd, stupid things, I'd go, "No, your patient can't leave the room until you type up your discharge summary and print it out and hand it to them." And I was like, "No, nope, not doing it." And they were, and it's this someone with like, a 2-year degree from a community college who's bossing me around, telling me what to do. And I was like, "No, I'm not doing it." And they look at me and they could fire me. One time I was there on a weekend working a Saturday. I was the only doc there. I had one MA, another MA didn't show up. I went to the MA and I said, "Hey, could we please get a urine dip on, room 3 before I go in?" She literally goes, "I am not here to serve you. I have other things to do today." And I just said, well, okay. And I got my bag and I left. And
Hmm.
she chased me out in the parking lot. And she said, what are you doing? What are you doing? You can't leave. And I said, yeah, I can. She goes, well, we've got a patient in there. Again, it was quick care, right? So these aren't like super. We got a patient in there and I have to close the clinic and call everyone and cancel them if you're not here. And I said, that is my point. Would you like to work with me today? Or would you like to call the manager and tell them you have no doctor today? So, what I learned from that, though, we have lost so much power and we are so afraid. And we cannot quarterback a team when the team is taught they don't need a quarterback. And they are taught that. And we allow it. And so I wish, like literally, Peter, if every single one of us said, every single doctor in the United States said, we are not going to work tomorrow. And I know this gets to unions. We are not going to work tomorrow because we are not doing the EMR anymore. And we are not accepting an annual pay less than 300,000 for any of us who work full time, or 400,000. Nope. We're not.
No.
We would not show up for half a day and it would be fixed. And one of my friends said, yeah, but if we did that, people will die. And I said, but people are dying.
Yeah,
And we're still showing up.
that's one of the hard
Yeah.
parts on primary care is we are super obligated to our patients, and you want to make sure they get what they need. But I want to reflect back on a couple of things, Julie. One,
Yeah.
make a couple comments, and let's jump back a little bit to you starting that primary care. And if you're willing to share some of your health diagnosis, you've alluded to it, but I want to make sure we inform readers just
Clarify
a
it.
little bit,
Yeah.
or listeners, what it was. But one comment is, so one of the experiences that I've had is I've worked in primary care in a rural area. I actually took the place of the doctor that delivered me in my hometown, and I've been here forever. I'm wearing scrubs because I just got off the ER last night.
Yeah. I was
But
thinking you look a little tired. I
I
have
am
some
a
under
little,
eye cream. I'll send you some
yeah,
eye
yeah,
cream,
I'm a
Peter.
little
You can
tired.
fake it.
Yeah, fake it. No, I've a little underslept, but so I just showed up from the ER and just jumped on Zoom as soon as I got home. But what I found when it pertains to colleagues and that protection of collegiality and men and women's experiences and stuff, all those things you discussed, I have found some of my very best colleagues ever. They've just helped out so much on different things, and it's the friendship and the relationships that I think made those biggest differences. And you've probably found the same thing I have. When I've done this in the same place for long enough now, when I refer to some of my referring doctors or work with the other primary care doctors, I've cultivated a list of people that I consider them friends, and
Yeah.
I've shared with people on this podcast, about my own tumor and all this stuff, and thought I would die, and I was treated with such compassion by my peers at that time,
Yeah.
of just kindness, and some of our friends from residency came in and kind of filled in and helped me do my job when I was sick, and like I just those friendships and the collegial working relationship I found to be some of the most valuable things. And I have some people I won't refer to because of the stuff you just talked
Right.
about, where they'll throw you
Right.
under the bus, or they'll say something negative, or they'll get mad if they perceive that you're coloring outside of the lines.
Right.
But there are some excellent doctors out there, and I'm thankful to have found a pretty core group of them, and I consider them friends and colleagues, and that's an amazing thing when you can cultivate that particular group.
Well, and I think I'll tell you what I think, and I don't know that it's correct. I think that's a testament to who you are as a person. You're a very high quality person with a lot of integrity. I am too. I can be a little abrasive sometimes. I get a little short tempered sometimes, but some of that is there's places in my life where I've had to advocate and apologetically not done it. Like I haven't done it. And then in hindsight, I look back and realize I was mistreated and didn't know how to advocate for myself. And then I get angry. And then when something thematic comes up again later, I set a boundary and it's tricky. I have a very small, okay, I'm just going to be completely transparent about two things. One, I wonder, or I think that the environment in which I practice for the most part, not just direct care can be really isolating. Being, if I was still billing insurance, being an independent family physician in a growing sort of metropolitan community dominated by two major hospital systems is radically isolating
Right.
and scary. And I have lost a ton of the connections I had because I don't go to board meetings. I don't go. I chose to train in Muncie, Indiana, where you and I trained. And I came back to what is my hometown, radically changed. When I left, physicians in Boise were doing, family docs were doing deliveries and scrubbing in the hospital. When I came back 3.5 years later, family doctors didn't do deliveries anymore. My decision to train outside of Boise strategically altered the path of my career because I don't have the connections residency would have allowed me to have here. I believed I could make them up really quickly when I came back. I worked in an employed construct with a hospital that was sued on the national stage for a monopoly and saying they were doing things with their EMR to force physicians to only use their physicians, right? So my practice environment, probably because of my personality, probably because of the two major hospital systems having such a heavy hand on physician relationships, referral relationships, and physician time, are there's not, I don't know if it's back, but they got rid of the physician's lounge at the hospital around the time I came back here, right? So there's these even symbolic changes in honoring that physicians need space to congregate. So there's not a lot of cross-pollination in my experience because of the professional circumstance I have, including going out on my own for 10 years and just being now. I will say I have a teeny number of physicians that I think are some of the world's most amazing people because they've done exactly what you say, but it's a much smaller scale than I'd hoped. And I would say oftentimes I feel like when I reach out, so if I called right now, I would say if I called 10 specialty physicians right now about a patient, none of them would get on the phone. Even if I said, this is Dr. Gunther, we have a mutual patient. Okay, case in point. 2.5 years ago, very sick patient that I co-shared, so to speak, with a specialty physician who 2 weeks prior had made a catastrophic error that I found in the notes. Catastrophic error that I caught. And his notes needed amend to be correct. And I felt strongly that him seeing the patient directly was an opportunity to kind of like wrap everything up and move forward in a way that was very protective of the circumstances that had happened. Happy to say moving forward, the patient, 2 years later, patient is okay now, but just catastrophic error that almost led to the patient dying. And anyway, called, asked, I said, this is extremely important. I need to speak to so-and-so. And this is a doctor I've worked with in the past. Oh, he's not available. Was he in clinic today? Yeah, but he's not available. Okay, here's my personal cell phone. Could you have him call me back? Doesn't call me back. 2 days later, call again. Need to talk to him. Da, da, da. The fourth time I called, I finally said, may I speak with his nurse? He gets on, and it's only his nurse. And I said, I am calling because on this date, he said this and diagnosed this and did this. And he almost killed this patient who called me that night. And I saw her, in the middle of the da, 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 da. I'm calling to help him protect himself because they told me they are considering legal action. I have never spoken with that physician. So that's an extreme example, but and I used to take it so personally, and it is a little personal because I stepped out of the system, and so some people don't know my name. But I think actually what it is it's just catastrophic burnout. And I think many of my colleagues are just running around with their hair on fire, barely surviving. And we're seeing that impact patient care. We're seeing that impact physician collegiality. We're seeing that impact downtime. But yeah, where I live, if I call, people do not get on the phone. Doctors do not get on the phone. And it's not just me. Now, there's 2 or 3 in town that will call me back who have been absolute rock stars in my life and in my patient's life. And I'll share it. One of my best friend is an internist in town. I have 2 best friends. One's a doctor, one isn't. And he would probably say differently. He stayed in the system the whole time, stayed within the same internal medicine group the whole time, has relationships with specialists he really leverages. He was high up in admin at the hospital and the quality control. And from that, I think people know return his calls. But he has maintained a really joyful approach to medicine, and has had his clinic has sort of a close knit collegiality as well. But even then, sometimes he gets pretty frustrated. But so that I don't mean that. I don't mean to be the Debbie Downer. I think there's an opportunity for med students and even people mid career to look back and go, gosh, can you reach out and make those connections? Can you help out when someone, you look in the other hallway and someone's just getting smashed? Like, can we bring that back? Right. That, like, let's all get through the day together. The direct care community is and was a remarkably powerful collegial community for me until I was president of the Direct Primary Care Alliance. That was the toughest leadership job I've ever had, because I was leading leaders who didn't want to be led. And the misogyny among some of the entrepreneurial business physicians who think outside of the box, step outside the box, aggressively do radical things, have a certain kind of wiring. And what I found within the direct care movement, within my time there was a very, very, very heavy weight of misogyny. And I had some very close relationships with people I would consider crazy colleagues, dear friends, that I severed a year ago because of the behavior of one colleague towards another colleague that is illegal and has not been addressed. And I was kind of roped into it, a discussion that I didn't want to have, and told some things I didn't want to know, and profoundly disappointed at the lack of professional conduct among a small group of people. But then on top of it, when some things came to light, super disappointed that the issues have not been owned up to or remedied. So that's the Debbie Downer side, that I have struggled with my collegial relationships because, and then I just interviewed at the med school for a half-time full professorship position. And they said, you're amazing. Ability to teach is amazing. Clinical knowledge is amazing. Boots on the ground, primary care skill, amazing. But we're not 100% sure you'll play well with others, kind of a thing. And they're 100% right. Like, I don't belong in an academic medical setting right now because I don't want to think in the box. I don't. It's exhausting, right? Like, let's just solve the problem as quickly as we can in the most elegant way and get on with life. I just don't care about rules, so to speak. I mean, I care about law. I care about doing things right. But if the rules encumber the ability to get the work done, I struggle profoundly. And an academic medical setting is full of rules. So they're not wrong, but it's just an interesting testament to thematic for me, which is, I can do the work. I can do it really, really, really well. But I give administrative people hell.
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking, Julie, one of the, as I reflect on this, one of the things that you mentioned that I resonate with is I feel like physicians have given up their power, and certainly big fish, small pond, or small fish, big pond. I'm a big fish in a small pond. You're a small fish in a big pond, And one of the challenges, but no matter where your practice environment is, physicians across the board have given up their power, so to speak, instead of saying the final word is that of the physician, because that's the one who's stayed up all night with the patient and has the training and yada yada. And we've allowed a lot of our administrative staff, our insurance decision makers, and people that are not medically trained to have that power. And I'm not, like, I've tried to regain some of that power by through relationship building and that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Because the insurance system is something that I can't personally change, but I do think that does come power when you say, no, we're not doing that. We're going to do this because it's the right time for the patient. And the buck stops here because my name is on the chart. I'm the one getting sued if something goes wrong. And you've known me for years, Julie. I'm not a yeller. Yeah. But the only time that I really will get pretty fierce is if if they're doing something that's going to harm a patient, and I say, like, hey, this cannot happen. And I mean, I kind of yelled at some of the nurses one time a couple of years ago when they didn't have the appropriate equipment to deliver a baby. And I'm like, where is that? And so they still talk. Remember that day when Dr. Crane yelled at us?
Yeah. But you're like, yes, and I'm glad you remember, because we can never have that happen again.
Well, and to that point, when it comes to dealing with administrators and stuff like that, we have gone the rounds with different ones. The one we have right now is quite good, and I've really been thankful for the collegiality that has developed with that. But it has helped, having been in the same place for a while, to say, look, I've been here long enough that no, we are not doing that. And it
Yeah.
and
Well,
that
and
has given some power back to that.
I think I see, yeah, and 100%. I think my crazy advice would be, but this comes down to how you're wired, right? And a lot of our colleagues are not risk takers. They didn't become physicians to like take on crazy risk, right? Were rule oriented for so many years. We have to do what's prescribed to us, right? This class, that class, pass it this way, this test, and then we come out and we're like, what am I supposed to do next, right? So it could be really crazy. But we have to start saying no. And the reality for a lot of our colleagues is if they speak up and say no, they're going to get fired.
Right.
And what's crazy is I saw something, it's like 200K at least to replace a primary care physician, not to mention the burden on your colleagues when you leave, because with these, at least where I'm from, the systems don't figure out what's going to happen to your 3,000 patients when you leave. They're like, they'll figure it out.
That's the
And your
hardest
colleagues
part.
are like, yeah. But we all have to start, we have to start saying no, and we have to say brave no's, and we have to say no in the direction of, this patient's going to die without a DNC, I'm doing it. And then the entire medical system has to come forward and protect the physician who earnestly moves in the direction of not allowing a patient to be harmed, not allowing a colleague to be harmed, not allowing a known untoward outcome because someone else doesn't have the ability, education, motivation, or integrity to. So I loved the jobs I didn't care about. Not that I always cared about patients. I loved the jobs I wasn't invested in when I had all these side hustles, because I learned my power of no. Because I wouldn't have said those things if that was my only gig and I was scared or worried, or I would have felt irresponsible. And I will also say, my counselor says, when you change, there's always a change back message. And the other problem with no for a lot of people is when you say no, the environment around you shifts and you're treated differently. So you don't just have to muster the strength for no right now. You have to muster the strength for the rest of your career hearing from that one nurse. Remember when you yelled at me, right? You know what I mean? So
Yep.
and these things extract energy from us. They really do. So yeah, I've had multiple acts of insanity that were different versions of no, that were like, I will not accept the outcome I see that is about to happen. So what agency do I have to modify the outcome, including, you know, telling a family to ditch a patient in the ER, say you have no discharge plan, we're not taking him home, and leave, and then to say, I just need, get him to the ER now, and I will meet you at the end of the clinic day, and then sitting at the bedside until the hospitals came around to tell basically tell the hospitalist, like, if you discharge him before figuring out what's going on, I will report you to the board of medicine, because this is the seventh time I've hockey pucked him back to the hospital when he can't hold his head up in my clinic. Like I've fought the system by like literally being physically present. And I'll tell you another thing, which is interesting here. If I go into the ICU to see a patient and ask to speak to the physician, they're not available. And then the nurses are like, who are you? And I'm like, I'm an outpatient physician. I'm Dr. Julie Gunther. I'm this patient's physician. And they're like, doctors don't come in here. So what's funny is this in a sad but a good way. What's so revelatory about this, in my opinion, is I always had this crazy calling for what my perception is the environment in which you are practicing, right? Because my guess is if you walked into the ICU now and no one knew who you were, but you had your white coat on, you said, I'm Dr. Peter Crane, the gentleman in room 4 is my patient, you would be treated as a physician, right? Like it'd be
Well,
like,
I would
oh,
hope so.
the doctor's.
Ideally, if it's somebody I've worked with for years, they'd be like, "Oh yeah, well, Dr. Crane sends
Yeah,
this somebody every 2 months."
yeah,
But
yeah.
no, but
But so I think some of this is the like bigger city medicine, and I again, we all have such different constraints, different practice environments, not just what we intrinsically being, but what's extrinsically going on and the forces that are there. But I would like to say, after being sort of a downer here, I can't. Shirley Lamontia said this once, and Shirley, there's two. With all respect to you, because I didn't practice with you a ton, but you, Aaron Brown, Jeremy Haymore, like some of us that train together are some of the people I trained with. I won't throw myself in this bucket necessarily. The most profoundly gifted humans and physicians I've ever met. Like if I could construct my own, I'm about to cry. If I could construct my own doctors, like if I was like, who would be my ER doctor? Who would be my family doctor? Who would be my oncologist, even though they're not an oncologist, right? My doctors would be made up of people from Ball Memorial Family Medicine Residency that we trained with.
We trained with some awesome folks, didn't we?
Yeah, and one of the absolute, and Dr. Hedmark, who's my dear friend here, who I went to med school with. Like, I know the doctors that I want to doctor me. Unfortunately, most of them aren't. I can't round out everything I need, right? I don't have an endocrinologist and a surgeon. And Shirley LaMantia, Dr. LaMantia, I just remember in residency, hands down, one of the most passionate, gifted, grit-laden physicians. I've never seen someone so uncompromising in their dedication to their patients and how they're going to take care of them. And we met up a couple years after residency, and she said to me, and I'll never forget it. She said, people ask me all the time, am I glad I became a doctor? Like, would I rather do something else? And she goes, I don't know if I'm glad, and I don't know if I want to do anything else. And what she said, she goes, and her answer was, she could never comment on if she was super glad, but she was able to comment, and I'm not doing her justice. She was able to comment that, like, there's nothing else she would have chosen, right? Like, it was like, I don't know if this was the best choice for me, but there's nothing else I clearly would have picked. And it was this interesting way, and I didn't do it justice, but this interesting, I like to call it like the upside down. It was this interesting upside down of how to think about choosing to become a doctor. And I can focus on what being a doctor has taken from me. I can focus on the hard parts and the negative and the challenges and the things that don't meet my expectations for what I believe this work should be or should give back to sustain me to do it the way I do it. But the last couple of years, what I've reflected on is actually what it's given me. And it's given me such a profound sense of purpose. I don't think I would have the confidence of self that I have had I not done this work. I would not have the ability to enter any space anywhere in the world and connect with people and talk to people. I wouldn't be so empowered in my infinite curiosity. Like, when I see someone apologize for asking questions, or in my kids or my husband or social connections, we go into a restaurant and they're like, I'm just like, hey, I like your shirt. How are you? Who are you? Where are you from? Like, and people comment over and over again that I just connect with people everywhere I go. It's weird to say. I just have, there's a skill set that is fundamentally who I am, that is from doing this work. I don't believe most people have the gift of thinking very deeply about their own death and dying process, or childbirth, or estate planning, or how do I want to use my time? Like we are a participant in so many intimate moments in people's lives. If we do this work the right way, that we have the gift of shared storytelling that allows us to make choices I think we otherwise wouldn't be able to make, for our own lives and our own families' lives. So the gift of advocacy and curiosity and rapid learning and problem solving in creative ways, and understanding the human condition and how lonely people are and how scared people are and how imperfect people feel. Anyway, I have fundamentally been transformed through doing this work. And I think my life right now, even if I never come back to primary care, my life right now has been so profoundly enriched through the years of doing this work. So, gosh, am I glad I made this choice? My answer is simply, I can't fathom having made any other choice. But I shared with you, I was diagnosed with breast cancer when I was 40. I can't do anything simply. I got to do everything like it's on fire.
That's
And
a good
so,
comment, Julie. Ever since
yeah,
I've known you, I've thought that Julie, she is going to do everything. Just she's going to get it all done.
yeah. Well, we had a colleague in residency who was very abusive to me verbally. In hindsight, his conduct probably wouldn't stand up. I mean, he had a very long name with lots of letters in it. Um, and we, as a residency population, had a super, super, super sick patient that I took on. And I'll never forget or forgive him for this because it's added to me second guessing my passion for difficult things. But he said to me, "Yep, there's Gunther. When the ship's on fire and it's capsizing and drowning and all the rats are jumping off, she always jumps on." And that gets to all of this in a negative way, which is being gentle with your colleagues and honoring that they're different from you and honoring that, yeah, you might want nothing to do with that shipwreck, but thank God you have a colleague who does, because that shipwreck needs a doctor. And if you're the only one, you would have to deal with that shipwreck, right? So honoring that we all have our own learning process and we're all trying to serve and we're all trying to hold up a lot of things, and keeping your crappy ass comments to yourself because maybe you're intimidated by that doctor because she went to a better med school than you and she knows how to run a code. Or maybe you're upset with that doctor because she was supposed to be in your class and all you've heard about was for a year was how this awesome girl from Idaho is going to come and join the residency. Maybe you've got your own stuff to deal with, but I think if we can all back off and try to honor that we're all trying to show up to do really difficult work and care for ourselves and care for each other and care for patients. And the more heavy lifting your colleague does, the less heavy lifting you might have to do, right? So anyway, but my new mantra, Peter, is you can't have the warmth without the fire. So you want to put out my fire, you're going to be pretty cold.
No,
And
see, I love it.
you can't have the magic without the mess either.
That's
so
right.
I bring magic, and a lot of people complain about the mess, but
No, but you can speak as a primary care doctor. You can speak having gone through a cancer diagnosis. You can speak for having been a patient advocate, and you can speak for having been a friend. And when you find other colleagues who have gone through hard times, I know you've been there, Julie, and that makes a big difference. And I think on those things, those are still in my life the most enriching things. Like I said before, when I think back, I told you this story, maybe I can't remember if I shared it on the podcast. I don't remember if I told you, but when I had that tumor, and I've shared with podcast listeners before, so two of my friends from residency, Dr. Brinkerhoff, Dr. Hopwright, found out about it. And like out of the blue, each of them individually, without knowing the other one had done it, called me and said, "Hey, Peter, do you need us to come do your job? Because I'm in a small town."
Yeah.
Like there was no, and they both, one was in Alaska, one was in Virginia, and both of them said, "We will just come. We will come," and they did. They dropped everything for 2 months, and they just came and did my job, and there was it kind of made all the difference to me, and I felt like it was a blessing from heaven, because they had just happened to have their lives set up in just such a way at that moment that they called and said, "Hey, we'll come do it." And they did. And I didn't worry 1 minute about my patients because they took care of it.
And that, like, I get chills in like a good way.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you and I know, like, there's probably 10 or 15 more people we train with who would do that.
Absolutely.
But the magic is those two saw it and came out. The reality is, now this is where I have my edge. Your community should be thanking them and understanding what just happened. Because the reality is, I would love to see a world where you could have tapped out for 3 months, 6 months, 8, whatever you need, and the world understands. They got to figure it out, right? Because what's funny,
and they did. We had already lost one of our doctors, and so we left. And so we would have left it with not enough doctors, no other doctors in my clinic, and we're an hour and a half from any other like medical center. And so for some of our older folks, it would have been a big challenge.
It would have been a challenge. And the reality is, though, that's a little bit of what we're starting to look at, right? I have patients and I have family. I have patients who still reach out to me. I'm not their primary care doctor anymore, but people are like, "What am I supposed to do? I can't get in. I can't I really hope we don't get to a point of total crisis, but I also kind of think until individual patients, so to speak, can't get their health needs met, the average run-of-the-mill person is not going to understand what you and I are talking about when we say, like, how do we restore physicians? How do we encourage physicians? How do we keep people in the game? How do we inspire people to do this work? How do we make this something that really is work that capable people can and want to do their whole life?
Right.
And physicians have to be able to step off. They have to be able to have life moments. They have to be able to take care of themselves. We need a system that has the ability to protect the physician in a way that the physician is able to be restored in the process of the challenges of this work, right?
Right. Well,
And I yeah. So and I don't mean that in like a dark way, but I left primary care for a number of deeply personal reasons, and I left it largely because when I had cancer, it was awesome. I had cancer and then had a ton of complications. So I had breast cancer. I have a really terrible family history, so it wasn't unexpected. But fortunately, unfortunately, the majority of my family that has had cancer has also made a series of life decisions around self-care that I was kind of hopeful would pan out differently for me, right? But I do think sustained, profound stress triggers tumorigenesis. I just do, and maybe that's not innovative. Maybe there's data to that, but I think my cancer was genetic, plus the decision to become a doctor was what led it to just totally go nuts. But anyway, I had cancer, and then I had a pretty extreme number of health complications. 2 surgeries and 2 huge surgeries in 1 year, and multiple hospitalizations. Anyway, and then right after that, it turns out I had hyperparathyroidism. Right after I finished my radiation, which went undiagnosed for 2 years, and I was traveling around the country periodically giving speeches and trying to advocate for direct primary care. And if I stayed up late, had more than one glass of wine, like 2 glasses of wine, the same day as an airplane flight, I'd wake up in the middle of the night with like an ice pick headache and throw up all night. And I have migraines. And so I was like, these are atypical migraines. It turns out it was profound hypercalcemia,
oh,
which my oncologist missed because I had so many other things going on. My slightly elevated calcium went undiagnosed. So then so I just had this like, and then I tripped and ruptured, my meniscus. Anyway, I just had like bam, 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 bam. So, and in the process was still holding up a direct primary care practice that I shared with a nurse practitioner, PA, and but what happened fundamentally was it was like I moved from like a car with a 50-gallon tank to a car with a 20-gallon tank, but the gas stations are still spaced really far apart. Um, and so my own health challenges fundamentally shifted the balance of my reserve, and the work became really hard because I didn't have my short-term memory is impaired. I supposedly have a pretty high IQ, so I accommodate, but I was very resistant and very angry and very emotional about the limitations I had because I couldn't do the work the same way. And I fought that for a long time. And um, right now I'm sort of at a place, I'm at a place of acceptance. My brain blips, which was never, I didn't realize how awesome my brain was until it went away. I was like, oh,
that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, my brain was awesome. I didn't realize, honestly, did not realize I make videos of everything in my head. So even if I didn't do a note after an encounter, I had a video. Like literally, I could be like, oh yeah, okay, I said this, I said like a straight up, not, and I don't have a photographic memory. I have had a videographic memory, and it was awesome, but I didn't realize it. I didn't realize that like being able to do a note 2 days later from, and be like, oh yeah, okay. Like I didn't realize that isn't a thing. I didn't realize that when you review labs, you see a patient on a Wednesday, you do your encounter, you order labs. I rarely had to re-access the note when I reviewed labs. I'd reviewed labs and remember exactly why I ordered everything and I can visually see, like if I did a cervix exam, this is going to scare people. Like 3 years ago, 3 years is too much, but when we were doing pap smears every year, like when I did a pap smear, I could remember what that person looked like a year prior. But it's not like I could be walking around Cabela's and be like, hi, and then remember this person's anatomy, right? But if I'd seen it before, I remembered it. And so I lost all of that. I lost all of it. And I don't have it back still. So what that meant is my stress went through the roof. My fear of making a mistake went through the roof. My ability to double check patients when they're like, in 10 years time, you've never told me I named calcium for my bones. I couldn't be like, oh my gosh, yes. Remember we talked about it for an hour last spring, like gone. And so my ability to do the work to the level that I felt so proud of the work I did went way down. And I could only do a small number of encounters per day because I had to immediately record it. And then I was in a model that was built on the ability of being able to take care of a certain number of patients for a certain amount of money, like $80 per month is what I ultimately, I got a little higher at the very end, but so the direct care model stopped working financially for me because I had to do just like in direct care, we do pretty complex visits. We'll do an hour-long visit with 4 or 5 problems, which is the best way to do primary care. It's super fun because your hypertension is usually related to your diet, exercise, work stress, smoking, alcohol consent, right? And it's so fun to be able to just deal with it all. But if I did that kind of visit and did labs and everything, I would have to immediately go and document every single thing so that 5 days from now, and then 5 days from now, I wouldn't even remember that I saw that patient 5 days prior. So I could front and center, I'm highly functional. Front and center, I can diagnose like a mad woman, like face to face right now, actively thinking I can answer questions, come up with everything. Next week, if you and I did this podcast, I would probably say, did I tell you about the guy that said about the ship? And did I tell you what Shirley said? You know what I mean? So it just became impossible for me to feel super confident that I wasn't going to blip. And that blip made me have anxiety and insomnia and not trust my ability to do the work with precision. And while that's sad, what's interesting is until I lost my workflow, I couldn't have told you what my workflow was. You know what I mean? Until I lost it, people say, oh, being a doctor is so hard. It's so complex. It's da 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 da. Yeah. What I didn't realize is like reading up to date articles or making the diagnosis or asking a series of questions. The complexity for me, none of that was the complexity. The complexity was carrying the patient's story longitudinally and having progressive ahas because diseases don't often manifest in one encounter. And that retention was so fun in a weird way because I love the continuity and I could have a patient encounter now and be like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, do you remember 3 years ago you had that rash on your shins? And they're like, no. And I'd be like, you did. That was, or like, do you remember that thing you had on your face and we thought it was fungus, but now you have joint pain really early and I bet you have lupus. And I'd figure stuff out and patients would be like, and my brain would, but in primary care, the story does not reveal itself instantaneously. And this is where urgent care so impairs the potential earlier diagnostic ability, not because the urgent care doctors are doing anything wrong, but because the splinter in your fingernail is early psoriatic arthritis, which you go, yeah, maybe I slammed it in a door. I don't know. And that's the art of medicine. But the art of medicine plays out if you can get the whole story, and patients never give you the whole story because the story evolves slowly, right? So, and then we see higher amounts of connective tissue rheumatologic diseases in women. And then women just get branded that they're crazy when they're like, they have all this weird stuff, right? So I loved putting it all together and I lost the ability to put it all together in under, 40 hours of note review because my brain can't retain a story. I also was functioning in a model that was designed to be deeply personalized and in a situation where periodically people would walk in and I'd have to just openly say, have we met? And the answer might be no. Or the answer might be, yeah, I was here for an hour last week.
Right.
And that was not only terrifying, but like, how do you do that? You fake it and you've never met them. That's a problem. You fake it and you have met them. That's a problem. So I hated it. I hated it. and lots of stress, anger, frustration, tears. But what do you do?
Well, Julie, like you've found a way to continue passionately helping people. And you've been like a change agent, with your work nationally and your work in your hometown and with your patients. And I love it. I know we're kind of getting close to the time here. Do you have any other last thoughts you want to share with our audience? I mean, I love
Yeah,
we've kind of hit tangential different things, but I
yeah,
hope, but I think the message that threads through all this is that there's passion. And the reason you're still a doctor and the reason you're still doing it is because you're passionate about patient care, making those connections and connecting people with the right answers and developing those relationships with colleagues. And that's really what keeps you going. I really appreciate you
yeah.
sharing it.
Well, thank you. I guess what I would say is there's incredible magic in caring for people. Um, but you have to, and you're going to be better at it if you work on caring for yourself. And I don't mean laying in the grass looking at the sky with 10 minutes of yoga. I mean working very hard to become deeply authentic where and what you are, and then recognizing that that's not a fixed thing. So I guess I would encourage that all of our physician colleagues, new or old, that you have so much to bring to whatever table you sit at because you're a passionate, capable person. If the table you're at right now is no longer serves you, it doesn't mean you don't have purpose. It doesn't mean you can't come back to it. It doesn't mean you can't find another table. It doesn't mean you can't serve. You can leave medicine as you know it and still robustly serve others. You can leave medicine as you know it, and it will be there for you when you need to come back. I had so much fear and fixed thinking that if I quit primary care, I'm done. And what I realized is I needed to quit primary care right now to make room and space for myself. And if I come back to it, it will be much more meant to be and it will look differently, but that I couldn't continue to move forward with the toolbox I had. And the work I was doing did not allow me to discover a different toolbox, right? So, and then I guess I would also say that it's going to sound weird, but the simple version is you can't save everyone. It doesn't mean you don't try, but people are all on their own journey and they also have to maybe come back. So, allow wiggle room for people to not be ready, people to not get it, people to not want to change, right? Allow wiggle room for the fact that you're just kind of a stepping stone in people's journey. And maybe you're the one stepping stone where their boots don't get wet. But it's not your responsibility to build the entire brick road for people, because doing so jeopardizes your energy and your ability to do this sustainably. So we move forward, we do the best we can with compassion and integrity, and that's enough,
Yeah,
right? That's enough.
I've thought that a lot, Julie. Is I'll see someone that was a patient of mine, and I'll be like, oh, how come they don't come see me anymore? And I used to feel bad about it. I'm like, oh, maybe I offended them or something. But I've gotten to the place where I say, well, I was there for them when they needed me at that time, and
Yeah,
while things
we're
circumstances
just
have
a
changed.
part of. We're just. I'm moving because my computer needs power, but
Oh,
we're a small part of people's broader life journey, and the duality of it is what I tell my girls is I say you always get what you need, but never on the schedule you want.
that's a good point.
So
That's a
you
good
will,
point.
yeah, you will get that thank you or that aha or that you made a difference, but not when you need it. So
Right.
your tank will be empty. Someone will bring you gas, but you'll be on the side of the road a long
Yeah.
time. So this is a rewarding profession. I genuinely I am wired for authenticity. I am wired for autonomy. And there is a conflict there because right now it's difficult to be fully autonomous as a physician. That's where direct care, cash pay care, going out on your own comes into play. But I genuinely believe there's no more authentic work than deeply caring for people. So
No, it's
hopefully that
awesome.
helps people.
It helps so much, Julie. I've loved our visit. It's so much fun to
Thank
catch
you
up with
so
you.
much.
I hope
Yeah.
I think people will love this episode. Kind of this passionate, excited person that you are, and I think it's been
Well, if
awesome.
they
So,
love it, they can find me on Facebook. If they
okay,
hate it, they can find you on Facebook.
there you go. Thank you so much, Julie.
Thank you, Peter. Good luck to you.
Thank you so
Thanks for
much.
doing this work. Okay,
Thanks. Bye.
bye.